About 80 to 60 million years ago, the Arctic was not nearly as harsh as it is now. It was still cold, but it was much warmer than now, as the average global temperatures at the time were much warmer than they are today. In this last era of the dinosaurs, before the asteroid impact wiped them all out, the Arctic was much more temperate, with an average annual temperature of around 6 degrees Celsius. Despite this generally warmer climate, the Arctic still experienced strong seasonal variation in temperature and sunlight, including many consecutive months of darkness. Surely this Arctic environment, albeit somewhat warmer than it is today, was still too cold and inhospitable for dinosaurs, right? After all, the common thinking is that dinosaurs, much like modern reptiles, are cold-blooded, and thus they're limited to warmer climates with hotter temperatures. That's the common thinking of people who might have been taught this in grade school decades ago. But recent research over the latest decade or two has really begun to turn this notion upside down. There's been evidence suggesting that at least some dinosaurs were indeed warm-blooded. Some dinosaurs may have gone into torpor or hibernation, and the primitive feathers of the dinosaurs could often provide insulation. They were able to retain heat and keep the dinosaur warm in otherwise cold environments. This all suggests that maybe dinosaurs could have adapted to the cold better than we initially thought. But then the question, of course, becomes, to what extent? Where's the limit of their primordial reptilian tolerance for the cold? That's the issue that's addressed in a new paper, which is the subject of today's science news. The paper, published in the journal Current Biology, analyzes a large fossil trove found near the Prince Creek Formation in northern Alaska. The area is well within the Paleoarctic Circle, about halfway between the edge of the Arctic Circle to the North Pole. And so, when you're at these latitudes, at about this point halfway between the edge of the Arctic Circle to the North Pole, you get about 120 days, or about 4 months, of continuous darkness in the winter season, where the sun doesn't rise above the horizon during the day. In the late Mesozoic environment, temperatures would have averaged around -5 to +1 degrees Celsius in the winter, and that would have included occasional snowfall. That's still pretty chilly, but it is a distinctly different environment than the Arctic, especially in the winter, that we've known for the last 10 million years, with its massive seasonal ice shelves, its bitterly cold temperatures, and its enormous snowfalls. Anyway, the fossils that they found at Prince Creek Formation include hundreds of teeth and bone fragments from at least 13 different dinosaur species, representing 7 different dinosaur families, such as hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and tyrannosaurs. Among the individual dinosaurs in these fossil samples, there are individuals who are both young and old, suggesting that dinosaurs reproduced and raised their young in these high-latitude Arctic areas. There's also evidence suggesting that some of these dinosaurs had a 6-month incubation period for their eggs, and in the study they plot out the timing of this reproductive cycle. This recreated timetable of dinosaur reproduction is one of the really great parts of this study, because it provides an eye-opening look into dinosaur life history strategies in the Arctic. Now, the evidence suggests that these dinosaurs would breed in the late winter months, and then they would build their nests and prepare for the eggs to be laid in the spring when plants would begin to bud. And depending on the species, the incubation periods would vary, but the young would hatch sometime in the middle of the summer to the early or middle fall. Incubation and hatching periods, they have to be timed with the seasons like this, because the warmer summer months, especially during the later summer months when you've had so much rain and blossoming vegetation already, that in the late summer, a lot of this stuff is all overgrown and there's a huge abundance of vegetation. And this is all critical for the newborns' nutrition and their safety. It's also good for the adults, who need the comfortable climate and the abundant fresh food during this difficult period where they're incubating the eggs and then raising the newborn offspring. But this also means that by the time the eggs hatch, the youngling dinosaurs are still too small and weak to make any kind of major migration to warmer climates before the winter rolls around. So the fact that these dinosaurs have their young up here would suggest that they don't have that major migration. It would suggest that they live here year-round. And this is one of the bigger findings of the paper, as dinosaurs have never been known to live and reproduce this far north. Lead author of the paper, Dr. Patrick Druckenmiller of the University of Alaska Museum of the North, said, quote, "These are the northernmost non-avian dinosaurs that we know of. They're actually nesting and laying and incubating eggs, practically at the North Pole," unquote. The authors speculate about how these dinosaurs might have warmed themselves or tolerated the cold winter months, citing examples of fossils from other regions like a feathered Tyrannosauridean from the Yixian Formation in northern China. Ultimately, the authors interpret their data to support the, quote, "growing body of evidence that at least some dinosaurs, coelosaurian theropods and Serpodian ornithischians, were endothermic. We posit that this served as a critical exaptation, enabling the dinosaurs' late Cretaceous high-latitude occupation," unquote. As a quick note, the term exaptation means it's a trait that's been evolved for one purpose, but then finds use for some other purpose. And so in this context, from what I've read on the study and from my understanding of the topic, I believe what they're saying is that there's evidence suggesting that for perhaps metabolic reasons, some dinosaur lineages were evolving endothermy, where they were producing more and more of their own internal heat through their internal metabolic and digestive processes, and so that they'd need to eat more food, but they would have a higher average body temperature and they'd have more energy, they could engage in more physical activity, and this would have drastically changed their lifestyle. This adaptation may still be being used for that to provide energy for a more active lifestyle, but now in these new habitats, these new colder habitats, it's found a new useful function, an exaptation, where it also keeps them warm. It provides enough heat for them to endure these colder environments. Now this is all really awesome, because it's evidence that feathers and adaptations towards endothermia for greater activity and then secondarily derived to be an adaptation for cold weather habitats, this was likely present in many more species of dinosaurs than just the immediate ancestors of the birds. The final stages of the dinosaurs' existence increasingly seems to have been a time where these mega reptiles were adapting to colder, darker habitats. It's really fascinating to think about how this would have progressed had the meteor not wiped them all out 66 million years ago. Perhaps today there would be giant feathered tyrannosaur descendants romping around the Arctic tundra, preying on the bulky, downy, bison-like herds of ceratopsian and hadrosaurian descendants as they foraged along the bogs and marshes of this cold, frosty, lichen-encrusted landscape. But instead, they died, except of course for the ancestral birds, which took to the skies and underwent an evolutionary radiation of their own. If you're interested in the technical details of paleontology, I really suggest you crack open this paper and give it a read. In the technical sections in the later half of the paper, they go into great detail about the fossil fragments that they analyzed, and how they interpreted this data to determine which dinosaur clade each individual piece belonged to. They also discussed the knowns and unknowns of the paleoclimate, the Earth-Sun rotational dynamics, and the debate over migratory and non-migratory hypotheses for boreal, subarctic, and Arctic dinosaurs. It's all really interesting, so definitely check that out if you'd like.